Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight to talk about essay tips. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road2College and the Paying for College 101 group, and I am here tonight with John Schlander, who is a professional writer, is a essay coach, and also is directing our essay coaches this year. So let me just do a little bit of housekeeping to set this session up tonight. Just so everybody knows, this is technically a meeting as opposed to a Zoom webinar. And the only reason I say that is if you'd like, you can put on your video so we can see you. And, we like to see people. And if you really want to ask us a question, you can unmute yourself in addition to putting questions in the chat. Thank you. I see a few people put their video on, so nice to see you. And this session is recorded, and we send out a link to the recording tomorrow. So I think that's all of our quick housekeeping. And the one last thing before we really get started is if you can put into chat, we'd love to know who's here tonight in terms of where you're watching from, what state you're in. Most people, I'm sure, have I will call you students are the rising seniors, class of 2025. And just curious, and it's okay, whatever your answer is, like, where are you in the process? And let's talk about the whole process. Where are you in the whole admissions process? Have you done some college visits? Have you, created a college list? Have you started any essays? And again, there is no judgment. Wherever you are in the process, we're just kind of curious so that we have a sense of, who's here tonight and kind of what the questions might be like. So let's see, small list, no essays. I mean, I will be honest, I would expect that most people tonight, hopefully you have started. So let's push that along. Hopefully you have some sense of a college list. It doesn't have to be the final list. And quite honestly, I'm expecting that majority of students have not started their essays, which is okay. But now is a good time to start that stage of the process. So I see a lot of people have done college lists, testing, no essay. Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing this. It's just nice to see who's out there and kind of, where, what kind of stage of the process you're at. Oh, this is a good one. I mean, we've narrowed the list down to 25. I'd be curious, Heather, where did you start? What number did you start at? 25 is still good. You probably have to get lower, but I'd be curious, how many colleges, what was your starting point?
The students applied to a lot more schools than when I went to school.
Yeah. What incentive, like chocolates, can I use for our youth to write their first drafts of essays? That's a tough one. This is a big parenting challenge to get students to start. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. And I will say, so we asked people if they wanted to share an essay draft. To tell you the truth, we got a few in at the last moment, which is okay. We are going to pick one of those drafts and talk about it live at the end, because we want to kind of show you more of a process of how students can work through essays, and then we'll apply that process to this sample essay that we did get. So hopefully that will be helpful for you. So let's get started, and we'll start with some slides that we have. Great. So tonight, I do want to go through, and we're going to go through quickly, a few slides that just talk about the admissions process in general. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want to give some context to when the essay is really looked at in the admissions office and the admissions process. So we're going to talk a little bit about the admissions process in general and where the role the essay plays. We'll talk about, what we come to realize are winning qualities or qualities of a winning essay or a really strong essay. And we'll talk through the steps that we use to work with students to get to a good essay. And then kind of working through or showing you those steps, we're also going to show you examples of real essays that we have from previous seasons working with students to both to show you kind of, what they originally gave us and kind of the feedback we gave back to them, and also show you in one particular student kind of came with nothing, and I don't say that in a bad way, but they hadn't done anything yet, and they couldn't figure out how to get started and kind of how we moved them along and got their ideas generated. And then we'll quickly talk about what an ideal timeline is like, and then we're going to use the sample essay that we got literally like 20 minutes ago. So that's what we're going to go through tonight. Okay. So I'm curious, and if anybody wants to put it in chat, how many of you have heard the term holistic admissions review? And again, if you haven't, that's okay. But a lot of colleges use that term holistic review, and what they're meaning is that they are looking at lots of different pieces of somebody's application. And as we know, there are different parts of the application. There's whether or not a student took the tests, the SAT or ACT, what their grades are, how hard the courses were that they took, what their letter of recommendations are. So what are other people saying about that student? What other extracurriculars or experiences do that student has? And then admissions offices are comparing a lot of that information to what we call is the high school profile. And again, I'm curious if anybody who's listening, who's here tonight, if you know what the high school profile is, and if you've actually pulled up and looked at your high school profile. I don't have a quick sample at hand, but basically the high school profile is a summary of your high school's statistics. So how many students at that school are college bound? What schools do they go to? Usually they list like maybe the top the schools, the top 30 colleges that students attend to. What percentage of students take different AP classes? What the grade distribution is. So it's truly a profile that if I didn't know anything about your high school, I could look at that profile. I could look at an individual student's transcript and give a sense of where does that student fall relative to that particular high school and how difficult that high school is and the other students that attend that high school. So somebody's saying, where can I find the high school profile? Most schools, can't promise every school, but a real 98% of schools actually have their own high school profile on the high school website. So whatever your high school's name is, I live in Pennsylvania, mine is Lower Merion High School. You would just I would Google Lower Merion High school profile. And so whatever your high school's name is, I would Google their name and the word high school profile. If you cannot find it online, by all means, ask the school counselor. This should not be a hidden piece of information. If you ask the school, they should, without any qualms, give you a copy of what the school high school profile is. And just so you know, so this high school profile is what is given to admissions officers. So all the colleges that deal with your particular high school are getting a copy of the school's high school profile. So when we talk about this holistic review, colleges are and these days the number of applications that colleges have gotten have just skyrocketed. They call it like a hockey stick type of graph, and colleges can't look at every essay that is sent in with applications. So they kind of have what I guess I would call is like a stepped process of a screening. And they are looking at applications and screening them first from an academic review. And I kind of love this comment. We had a former dean of admissions in a previous session talk a little bit about this. And she wanted to make the point that, if you think of colleges as businesses. On some level they are. They're in the business of academics, right? So if your student is going to succeed at that school, the first thing that the college needs to make sure is, can they succeed academically at that school? So that's why they're doing an academic review. And so that academic review is looking at, the things that are in yellow, the test scores, the grade, the class, rigor. And every school might handle it differently. Every college might handle it differently, but they basically, come up with like a quick composite. And if your academic review composite number kind of passes whatever it is the bar is that they're looking for, then you go on to the next stage of the review, which is what they would call the personal review. And that's where they're looking at maybe the slightly softer parts of the application, like the letters of recommendations, like your, the experiences and the extracurriculars that get outlined in the Common App, and your essays. So the reason I am just emphasizing this is that if your student, you and your student, don't come up with the right college list, then and I'll define that in a minute. But if there are colleges on your student's college list where they might be reaches, and again, you can try, but if the reality is that there's too many colleges on the list where your student isn't even going to pass the academic review, then putting all this effort into essays, a lot of colleges aren't even going to get to the point in your student's application to read the essay. And there's one other kind of quote, then I will quote the dean that we worked with, who shared, even though I'm talking about a holistic review, these are almost her exact words, which I thought was a good representation of the process. She said, students are accepted based on a holistic review, but they are denied based on a non-holistic review. So what that is implying is that students will be denied because they can't pass the academic bar. And as I'm just explaining, the academic bar doesn't look at everything. So that's kind of the non-holistic part of the process. And a fair number of students get denied at that point, and it's only when they get past the academic bar that there is a true holistic review bringing everything else in. So I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I just wanted to kind of give the context at which point the essay becomes part of the process. So that's also why your college list is so important. Okay, so just, how important are essays? I think I went through that. Many colleges are, requiring one essay, which is part of the Common App. A lot of times there's a few different ways that people might refer to it. Well, we might refer to it as the personal essay or the Common App essay. It's that one essay that gets written, and it is part of the Common App, and whatever schools your student applies to on the Common App, they're going to look at this, personal statement. As I mentioned, essays help distinguish. Oops, John, sorry, can you go back quickly one?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So essays help distinguish the students. If your student has gotten past the academic bar, which I discussed, then the admissions offices are no longer really looking at the academics to distinguish the students because they've passed that bar. So now going forward in the process, it's the essay that's going to distinguish those students. And by definition of how the process works, those students are very strong and similarly strong academically. So now they have to be distinguished through the other parts of the application, which the biggest part is the essay. And then another piece, which maybe some of you realize, but maybe a lot of you might not, is if your student is going to apply to scholarships, and I'm talking about scholarships that the colleges offer, not private scholarships, or if they're going to apply to honors programs, then there's usually another set of essays that the student is asked to write. And so that's when the number of essays might start to feel like I don't want to say pile up, but there becomes a lot of essays that students have to create in the process. Okay. And then just to give you a sense of who's really reviewing the applications, because part of what we're going to discuss tonight, which John's going to talk about soon, is you need to know who your audience is, right? Like, so who's reading these applications and what are they looking for when they read the applications or the essays? the majority of times, it is an admissions officer, but referencing my comment earlier that the number of applications has skyrocketed at colleges. Colleges more and more over the past few years, really since the pandemic and test optional and the increase in applications, they are hiring professional readers. And most of those professional readers have some experience in college counseling. They may not all be former admissions officers, but a lot of them, and we know that some of them, because some of the people who we hire have been professional readers, and they are high school counselors, they're independent college counselors, and a college will train the outside professional reader in what they should be looking at, and they're usually doing the first screening of an application or even an essay, and then they're passing their notes and information on to the admissions officer. But in some cases, depending on the criteria that the college has given them, the professional reader may even be the first level of acceptance for the next round or denial. So just know they're professional readers that are kind of quickly going through applications. Then a lot of times after it gets past that academic bar, the admissions officers are truly reading the essays. And then finally, in a lot of cases, and this really applies more to honors programs or special scholarships at colleges, faculty are many times asked to read essays. Okay.
We ready to move on here, Debbie?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So Debbie was talking about who is reading these essays. Now let's think about what the essays are supposed to accomplish. And this is the overarching guidance that we give everybody. Think of your reader and think what it is they're looking for. In fact, in a couple of minutes, we'll put you all in the shoes of a reader or a faculty member who's reading these essays and how they view them. So the first thing to keep in mind with an essay is what it's trying to accomplish. So we've broken that down into 3 pieces here. It shows who you are, who the student is, and the potential you have. Usually it's answering a prompt, whether it is the Common App personal statement, where you're choosing one of those particular prompts, or a supplemental essay that's in response to college-specific prompts. You are answering a question, and you are trying to answer it in an effective and memorable fashion. And ultimately, you're trying to tell the colleges why me, why you should pick me, and why this college. So as you keep that in mind, think about who's reading them and what you're trying to accomplish. You may have seen lists like this. This is how we look at it. Students are trying to demonstrate that they have particularly valuable qualities for life, but certainly for being a good student at a good school. So we've broken it out like this: drive, curiosity, resourcefulness, contribution in the sense of service, doing your part to help the world turn, empathy, leadership, and expression. Expression meaning how you communicate, how you put ideas across. So as we look at essays, we coaches or parents or anybody else reading an essay, you should think about these, and you should think, what is my essay demonstrating to a college reader or a faculty member? What is it that I'm putting out there to the world in my essay? Doesn't have to be telling. In fact, usually we're emphasizing showing as much or more than saying those particular words. How do I show drive? How am I resourceful? How does my curiosity play out? Many essays we see do a few of these all at once. It's not that you have to do all of them. That would be a pretty involved essay, but you're picking what are your best qualities and how can you best communicate them, portray them.
Can I just mention one thing, John? And the other thing to keep in mind, again, thinking as an admissions officer, you want to read these essays and say, and think to yourself, how are you demonstrating to the college that you will be successful as a college student at their college and beyond, right? I mean, colleges want to make sure that you can successfully get through the 4 years with them, that you actually bring something to the college or make something of yourself and make something for the college while you're there, and then also after as an alum. So that's just kind of a phrase we use a lot to think about, like, how can you show that you will be successful at the school and beyond when you graduate.
Thanks, Debbie. So here is the process that we follow and that many people follow in some sense anytime that they're writing a more thoughtful piece, especially about themselves. So we've spelled it out in 10 steps here. I won't go through all of these here. I will just note that the writing of the essay doesn't start till number 4 here. So we're very much emphasizing the thinking and planning before you start writing. We'll go through more of this in a minute, and we'll talk about how that plays out as students go through their essay. I will just say, you may have experienced this in the work world with your children, with other people. Many people want to jump right into the writing and they don't really know what they want to say, and then they struggle with the writing. Or they try to think it through as the writing, they paint themselves into a corner, they realize halfway through this isn't working. So that is a thought process, but it may not be the most direct, most organized, most effective way to go about it. By asking yourself the right questions, keeping the audience in mind, looking at these traits, you can really go at it more effectively. So now we'll break it down on these slides. There won't be a slide for each of these, but I've grouped them, and we'll get to some examples too that show what we're talking about. So here's step number 1. You are thinking. You are thinking about, what are my best qualities? How do I exhibit them? Right? You're going to need the show in this essay. So you can say you have a quality, but if you can't show it, it's not going to be a very effective essay. I stuck the word recently in there too. I find, and I guess you could call this a don't for an essay, although I try to be more about the do's. But a don't is, don't force it. Like, don't say you're really interested in something, knowing inside, well, what have I really done on it recently? I took a physics course 2 years ago and haven't really done anything more about physics, but I'm going to present myself as being, Mrs. Physics, all about physics. So it needs to be something authentic that you are genuinely interested in and pursuing. Okay, so that's the idea behind point number 2. And can you use examples? So we hear a lot of talk about ChatGPT. I'll bring it up here. You may have read some interesting articles about it. ChatGPT doesn't know the student, doesn't know their experiences, and can't write a very effective essay. It will be curiously general. You may, with the right prompts, get some good writing out of it, but it won't be the authentic student. It won't be their experiences. And you could try to input different prompts. Some people are very advanced with prompts like that. AI is growing by the day. I'm just saying where the world is now. It can't climb inside your head, doesn't know your aspirations, doesn't know your potential. We might get there someday where you're talking through a series of prompts and it writes a brilliant essay. Just telling you, we're not there right now. And in fact, colleges are running scans on the essays to see, is this likely AI generated? So it can mess you up in a lot of ways. And I'm a big AI fan, not for this purpose. It can do all sorts of amazing things. It can also fail spectacularly. It can make things up. So I'll just leave it at that. I wanted to bring up AI because everybody has questions about it. I'm just telling you, as you go through this, you can sort of think about it. The things we're talking about are not chat GPT-ish things. They're not Bard or Jasper or all the other tools that are out there. They just don't lend themselves to it. Okay, now step number 2. Okay, we have the reader in mind. We have what we're trying to accomplish in mind. We've thought about our qualities. Now we're trying to match up with a prompt we need to answer. Okay, so ultimately it is kind of like a quiz, right? You really need to answer a question. Okay, so there's a lot of latitude in how these are laid out. I'll call them up here. These are the same as last year's Common App prompts. These are for the personal statements, the 650 word essays that students across the nation are already writing and many times struggling with and not knowing exactly what to say. Boy, those 650 words can feel so hard sometimes. But if you follow this process, you gain a lot of clarity, you know? So now you've gone through step 1. Now you're here and you're looking at these questions here. I'll note that the final one, number 7 there, is a free for all. People will often ask me about that. In my experience, hardly anybody chooses number 7. I think because like maybe it doesn't offer enough guidance, they want a little more direction. So they're choosing one of the other prompts. I've seen people bend and twist between a couple of them. There's nothing wrong with having an aspect of one prompt in another, but these lead you in a good direction as far as how am I going to approach the essay? And once you pick one, follow it, answer it memorably. Grab interest. Remember, we have all these essays flowing in and they need to differentiate. Oh, the dreaded step of outlining. I have a hard time getting professional writers to outline sometimes. I come from the news business. I've seen professional writers, news writers, who kind of outline in their head on the way back from an assignment, but they're outlining in some way. So if you don't outline a Common App essay, it can feel unnatural for many people to write about themselves unless they're used to journaling. But this is such a specific purpose. Outlining will help so much. It doesn't have to be this formal thing with, Roman numerals and everything, but write down the ideas and think about how one might flow into another. It's extremely helpful to write a thesis statement. Ooh, more dreaded words, right? If you're thinking back to school and thinking, oh, a thesis statement. Really, in a way, I'll come at it from a news background, kind of like a headline. More words than the headline, but it's sort of like, what's the main point here? What's this getting at? Just try to blurt that out in a sentence. That'll help bring clarity to the whole thing. You may never say those words in the essay, but everything's going to revolve around them. And I have seen people literally put, often a thesis statement can sound too, highfalutin, it's not in the right tone or whatever. So don't worry about it as a piece of writing. Just get it out there to sort of summarize what it is that you're going for. Then finally, we're writing. So here we are on steps 4 through 8. And here is our first example to show. So the steps here are memorable opening, right? This isn't about giving a laundry list of accomplishments. This is really about from the get-go, not a lot of throat clearing, not a lot of, build up or anything. You're trying to create a grabber of an opening. Then you are creating the body of your piece, sticking to your thesis. Many essays get too long because they start winding. Oh, I think I need to fit this in. Oh, I need to fit. But then we start paring down. Oh, that's not really essential. That's like a laundry list of things that can go in the Common App itself. I need to focus this essay and keep it nice, tight, 650 words. It sings. You need good transitions. Often people think of transitions as individual words. Consequently, then I'll just say classier, more effective transitions are more about the idea. How did one thing build on another? How did one thing lead to another? How did this make you think about this next thing differently? Those are the truer transitions. You may use transitional words, but it's not just about second and all those standard words that we might toss out there as transitional words. It's really about the ideas. And then finally, the conclusion paragraph. Not in conclusion, let me say, in the way people will joke about cliche conclusions, this is more about leaving the reader with a final thought. It should arise naturally from what you've already said. I'll often coach students to say, mention something from the beginning before. Don't repeat it, but mention it. That can be a nice technique to sort of harken back to what you said here. They sort of remember it. And then you're trying to move forward then. It could be literally about, your ambitions, your plans, where you're going, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. There's lots of really good essays out there that are more telling a story, portraying the traits that we're talking about, but they may feel a little more metaphorical like that. And people get the idea like a good story might be. Really depends on the person, what's their tone of voice, what sounds authentic coming out of their mouth. So that's more about what that's about. Now let's take a look here. This is our first example. This is a student that I worked with from Jump Street. So he had some ideas of what he wanted to write about, but he purchased our services, and I had the good fortune to work with him. We hopped on a Zoom call to discuss his ideas, and he wasn't sure, but he just started telling me about his interests. And I see he's in his bedroom, and there's all this stuff hanging on his bedroom walls. And I just started asking about, oh, these are my projects. What's that sound behind you? Oh, that's my 3D printer. Okay, so I keep getting more and more out of him, and then he's like, oh, my dad was a pilot, his dad was a pilot, so I'm into aviation, I'm into engineering, I build these drones. And then he starts saying funny things too. Oh, I crash them left and right. So I'm getting a feel for kind of an interesting young man he's showing his passion, right? He's not one of these people that's just saying, oh, I'm really interested in engineering and want to say, it's all around him. So then we started talking about some of his experiences. This is how we came up with the essay. He outlined it, he structured it, he got more advice from me. We talked about what details to include. I asked him to consider what the examples were saying between the lines. I kept getting more and more detail. No, tell me more. Don't just be, this will be interesting. People think, oh, it's not going to be interesting. So that's how we came up with this. I personally was kind of tickled by his sense of humor. So that's how we opened with what you might think of like a failure here. And he was actually a pretty good writer here too. My pulse quickened as my drone malfunctioned. I had to land it or lose it, but the vibrating camera feed made me dizzy. As soon as I navigated my prized project over grass, I cut the throttle. Fortunately, unlike another plane I built and crashed, this one fell safely to the ground. All around me in my bedroom are these past and present projects, each with a unique story and place in my heart. Drones, rockets, gliders, 3D printed prototypes, and airplane models hang on my walls or sit close at hand. I spend many hours in my happy place where I can be a builder, engineer, pilot, or even a kid playing with Legos again. I thought he ended up with a nice intro here that's saying some things about him, right?
I think it
And
says a
then,
lot within two paragraphs.
yeah, and it was kind of interesting. He wrote this, I helped smooth it out. I think he had several versions of this. I kept pushing more and more detail. This is what editors tend to do. And the details are what wind up really making it. You could say that this stuff in general, But his specifics are what really make it work here. He did the same thing in his conclusion. So here's the conclusion now, and look at how it sort of goes back to the beginning again. As I prepare for college, I'm thinking a lot about design, building, improving, and chasing my love for aviation and engineering. I will miss the wonderful laboratory of my bedroom, but as I hang my headphones on my 3D printed stand and look around at my flight-filled walls, I'm ready and eager to find new ways to fly. So there are just little touches in here, you know. So I would say he definitely shows resilience. He's showing resourcefulness. He's showing how he looks at failure as the mother of invention. Other parts of his essay talked about how he started building drones out of foam board because it was cheaper. He was crashing too many things that went beyond the little bit of money he had as a high school student. So it really all tied together. His love of it, even things he was doing as a kid, his family background with his father and grandfather, him going in a little bit of a direction here with designing and building things, and he's doing it. So that I thought was a good example of the process at play here. And then we get to the end of the process. But as an editor will tell you, is the most important part of the process. It's not really the most important part of the process, but it is very important. First, you need to edit yourself. Very hard to do. That's why they talk about a fresh pair of eyes, another pair of eyes looking at it. But you need to learn that you hit a certain point in anything you're writing, and you need to sit back, right? And it's not just proofreading it, that I spell everything right. Do I have all punctuation correct? It is that, but it's a lot more of that. Did I accomplish what I was setting out to accomplish? Does anything in here not read exactly as I meant it to? Is there an unintended meaning? There's lots of things to look for, bigger picture. And then it always pays to get feedback from somebody else, a friend, a parent, a teacher, a counselor, somebody. And of course, we offer this service here. I'm not trying to sell you here, but just saying that editing is just a key, very important piece of the process. Any questions here? I can pause for a second if anyone has anything to come in. We do have a little more to go through here, but I've been talking here, so I wanted to make sure that you're following what I'm saying here.
Oh,
We're about to enter the reader participation part of it here, but wanted to pause here.
This is a good question, John. Do we recommend that the essay gives insight into what the student wants to study?
So it's, and we talked about this in a previous session, actually. So you may hear people say different things. I would say if the student really knows, then yes, it's authentic to include it. But I will hasten to add, you don't have to know
right
at this early age what you're going to study. So no, you don't need to commit at age 18 to your life's work. But you likely will have an idea of your interests and thoughts, and it's perfectly fine to use college to explore those. I've had students, I'd call this sort of a hybrid approach. They're interested in the idea. They don't know exactly where it's all heading, but they know favorite subject, things they like to do. They like to teach people. They like to solve problems. They like to, so we get a lot of essays along those lines where the student might end up studying, 6 pretty different kind of fields. So no, you do not have to know at this point. This particular young man did. I've had some students try to say they're interested in something, and then I started wondering if they were forcing it. In this young man's case, no, I got no sense at all that he was forcing it. It was a twist on what his father and grandfather had done, because he didn't want to be a pilot, but and he clearly was interested in it. It's all around him.
Okay, no other questions right now.
Okay, it's your turn, everyone. You're now an essay reader or even a faculty member who has to read and decide in this complicated, holistic process of what to do about a student. They might be asking you, yes, pal, maybe pal, no, pal. They might be saying, for this pal, we're looking for something very particular, and they might ask you to look in something particular. But let's say we're being a little broader here and we're thinking about, does this sound like a good student we might want at college Y, your college? Does it sound like there is a good intellectual curiosity, a resourcefulness, a drive that this student has, some talent waiting to be, cultivated here? So we flashed up at the bottom there all these traits again that we went over a minute ago.
Yeah, so
And that,
if you guys just think about like drive, curiosity, resourcefulness, contribution, empathy, leadership expression, and think as we read this essay, which one of these traits is this student really showing or not, in the essay.
okay, so now I made this smaller because the next one would be hard for you to read. And I am a nice man. So I'm about to blow up the font for my older eyes and call it up over here. And I'm going to, forgive me, read this aloud. I'll try to be properly, with the proper emphasis and drama in the right places. Feel free to read along with me. In this case, the student had an essay and wanted us to edit it. Okay, so we do the service either way. We'll start from the start, and talk through an idea. We'll take a half written essay. We'll take a completely written essay, but people come to us for the coaching. How can I make this better? Am I on the right track if it's half written, or is it completed essay? Does this sound right? I got another one I can show you. So we have people at all kinds of different stages. So I chose this essay here as a good example. Okay, so that's just be thinking first big picture. Traits, does this sound like somebody a college might want? I know many of you are probably editor types that want to start getting right in there and marking things up. We'll do that in another couple of minutes, but think big picture here as well. As much as little things might jump at you, think big picture. What is this? What is the writer here putting across? Does it work? Is she demonstrating some valuable traits? Yes, it is a young woman. So cat's out of the bag there. Over the course of my life, I have spent days dedicated to mastering strategic games like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And Clue. When I was young, strategy and trivia games were my go-to pastime. Sure, the games themselves were cool, but I was more intrigued by the way playing them felt. Playing and succeeding in games that required as much mental input as those, especially when I was only an elementary schooler, left me with a sense of satisfaction that nothing else did. Instead of extrinsic rewards like ring pops after a good grade, I was more concerned with the highest possible score and how I could obtain it. I first tasted this high at my mother's childhood home in downtown Baltimore, when we were visiting my grandparents. Both of them were born and raised in a tiny village in the Mediterranean called, I believe this is pronounced Philippi, not Philippi like I would say in an embarrassed way, but Philippi. Anybody here know for sure? And neither of them made it past sixth grade. They moved to America after my mother and her brother were born, still not speaking English. By the time I was born, their English was still incomprehensible. So I grew up speaking both languages, living in two different worlds, my contemporary world and the mystical world of my grandparents. where society is stuck in 1968 and cigarettes are still good for you. My favorite thing to do with my grandparents, however, was word puzzles. In my 11 years of life, I hadn't found the challenge as hard as crosswords from an outdated Greek newspaper. I'm going to scroll a little here. I sat with my first one for hours, completely absorbed in a piece of paper I studied at the kitchen table, while my cousins played tag in the basement. Once I solved it, I felt unstoppable. I began to crave this high, this rush of intrinsic satisfaction. Nothing satisfied my desire to do more, to learn more, to be better, not until I started seeking more intense mental stimulation. I learned to find it everywhere, not just in crossword puzzles, but in school, hiding in the nooks and crannies of my life. I noticed that I would find it most frequently in my high school science and math classes. My freshman year biology class was notorious for having the highest fail rate in the school, but I could see myself passing, earning my high, so I decided to take it. Despite the difficulty I faced in the beginning, by December, I found my groove and worked hard for the success I saw. I found myself in a similar situation during my sophomore and junior years. I maxed out my schedule with AP classes and went to Greek school on the weekends to earn my Greek language proficiency certification. Although I had never experienced so much stress, I had also never felt so intrinsically validated, knowing that I gave my absolute best to everything I did and that it paid off. I live my life every day craving that high, chasing it with every action I take. My biology class showed me how much I love not only hard work, but the sciences, biology and chemistry being my favorites, both because of the subject matter and also because they demonstrated that if I work hard enough towards something, I will not let myself fail. In my biology class, I became good friends with a girl who had battled cancer growing up. As we worked together, our lives became more intimately connected. She introduced me to Hope Faster, thinking it would suit me perfectly. It is a nonprofit organization dedicated to pediatric cancer research. This combined my top interest, service and science. Being a part of something bigger than myself is one of the few things that fulfills me, leaving me with a sense of purpose and belonging. That summer, I discovered that participating in service and helping others fills me with the same sense of satisfaction as succeeding. Both left me with an insatiable desire to do more, to help more people, and to be better. So the dramatic reading is concluded here. Go ahead and put in the chat what you think the student is showing. What traits is she putting across here? You can also say specific things about the essay, but we're going to get more to that in a minute, the editing and the structure and all that. So you can make notes on that too. But first, let's talk about the traits she's showing. Is she putting herself across in a way that you, the decider here of the essay piles, is impressed enough by to put as a yes?
And John, was this her first draft that she sent in?
This, so you're clear, I have not edited this yet. We're going to get to that in a second, and I'll show you how I edited it. Yes, I made changes. But right now, like, this is the material we're working with. You can't save an essay that doesn't have the material there to begin with, right? You're going to have to start asking a whole lot more questions. You're going to say, I don't know if this is the right topic. I don't know if this whole puzzle or hard thing. So that's really where we're starting here. How do you think she is demonstrating her qualities here? does she sound like somebody you, the college essay evaluator, might be interested in?
Okay, so a lot of people wrote that they thought that there was drive being demonstrated in their essay, drive, motivation, resourcefulness, intellectual curiosity, definitely drive. So drive keeps coming up. Curiosity. Oh, somebody said, I'd be concerned about how she would respond to failure.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah. Somebody said, I don't see service except in naming the word. Okay, it seems like drive and curiosity are the strongest ones that people really saw come through.
So I'll go to the
Oh, and let me just say this. Somebody said, I think this is a good point. It needed to stick to the thesis. It sounded as though the topic was meandering onto a new topic.
So now let's go out of the essay back to the slides here. And successful navigation here. This is the essay again. Here's what I saw. So no two people are going to see something the same way, but we all saw it pretty similarly, at least the comments I was seeing there. Yeah, I would say drive was the number one thing she's exhibiting here. Specifically, she was talking about, even as a child, solving these puzzles, taking the hard science class that she didn't have to take. You saw lots of students will ask me, like, should I mention my coursework and all that? Not as a laundry list, but if it fits in with the theme, by all means, maxing out AP classes, Greek school on the weekends, pediatric cancer research. That's what she meant, I think, by service, is sort of like serving the world through, because that's what she wants to do. Curiosity, definitely. Cousins are playing. She's doing old Greek newspaper puzzles. Contribution, cancer group, plans to do medicine. But who's ever saying that about the whole service thing? Yes, I have other essays where students talk about service projects that they organized and rallied the community around. And some of these young people do some pretty amazing things. So this, I don't think, was her, her main point or a forte of her essay. It could have become a stronger point. And then expression, or how she's communicating. I thought the original draft had some nice phrases in it, nice ways to put things. Grandparents' mystical world, stuck in 1968 where cigarettes are still good for you. There were some things like that that were engaging and said something about her as much as the things she was describing. Okay, now let's go to the editing side of it. A couple of the comments were already about this. As editors, when we are, coaching a student on something, we'll do it through questions, we'll highlight parts of stories, best transition, is this extraneous? So it's a combination. We are usually working in Google Docs or talking directly to the student, and we are going back and forth. We might type in, what about something more like this? Or what if we cut this and you told me about this other thing? What if we included that there? So it's a lot of give and take, collaboration. Ultimately, these are the things we're looking at. So one of you mentioned about, did she meander from the thesis? That's a good point. The service stuff maybe wasn't strong enough. Did she have good supporting examples and specifics? She had them, maybe not all the perfect ones. Was it focused? Yeah, I think there was a little meandering there. Was it authentic? I give her points for authenticity. As I read it, nothing rung false to me. Like, man, she's forcing that, or this just doesn't sound right. This really sounded like an earnest young person, and all this was true. You read something sometimes and you kind of wonder, how it's being worded. Maybe some flow issues, maybe not all the perfect word choice. A couple things stuck out to me. I don't know if they hit you, but there were a couple things. She used the word high several times, not to be a prude or anything. Maybe she was just overdoing the idea of a high. I get what she meant, the adrenaline rush and all that, but maybe spread that around a little more. She said something about, I can't remember how she said it, in all her life or something like that. She's 18 years old. So there's a few things like that that we would adjust. So now I'll flip over here. I know this is virtually impossible to read. Heck, I can hardly read it. This is showing what we ultimately did with this essay. So where you're seeing the strike through type, those were things that were stricken from the record. Blue things were new words we put in. So you see little things, bigger things. You see pieces, especially down toward the end, where yes, I was taking out pieces to more emphasize the good stuff, to more emphasize the specifics. I had asked a number of questions that got her going deeper. So simple things instead of, oh, it was at the very beginning, not over the course of my life, but starting in elementary school, right? That was the real point. From her youngest years, she was doing this kind of thing. So, changes big and small. As I got older and entered high school in the middle there, I learned to find deeper satisfaction in more challenging classes like science and math. She was getting a little wordy there and, saying more than she needed to, or a little repetition. You see, I got rid in the second to last graph there, craving that high was coming. Okay, just overdoing the high stuff a little bit here. Cut it out, get it more immersed myself in the sciences. Just trying to make each thing build on the other. So you can sort of see the transitions at work in the paragraphs and then how we brought it home there. Her initial conclusion, some people might have liked it or left it, but she was like, with passion and purpose, who can stand against me? At this point, and this is a matter of opinion, at that point, that was like the first note of being overblown. It just seemed to me. Sometimes a younger person might lack that kind of perspective or see it in a different way, or they're me against the world kind of thing. And really none of the rest of the essay wasn't like that. So that's example of a tone change. She's definitely eager. So that's when we settled on, she's talking about all the medical challenges and all that's left unknown here, especially with pediatric cancer and how heartbreaking it is. And she knew what she wanted to study. It wasn't forced. That's all what she was talking about. So that's how you see the blue at the bottom there, including we face a world of medical challenges and I'm eager to confront them and become part of the solution, not, who can stand against me. So just a change in tone and sort of brought it back like that. Again, lots of different editors would handle things different ways. Through the back and forth, this is what we came up with. In my estimation, I use this example because I think it was a good example of something that the student had clearly thought it through, had examples, had thoughts to say, but needed some help with tightening, focusing, bringing out the right specifics at the right time, and ended up with a strong essay here. Any other questions on any of that piece of it before we go through the timeline? Are we early in the process, mid-process, late process? Are you already too late? Where are we here? Any more questions on any of this before we talk about timelines?
Yep. Oh, this is a good question. I don't know if you know this exactly, but I was going to say something along these lines. Someone's asking, what was the word count in the first draft? And maybe what they're getting at, I don't know if you remember the exact word count, is, and I'm sure, John, you can share your recommendation. You shouldn't write to the word count in your draft.
I get worried when people are filing essays and they're 649 because it's still to be edited. So an essay that comes in at 650, I'm going to have to trim some out of, because in all likelihood, I'm going to ask them to add other things, right? Other things that are more valuable than what's already in there. But I trust as an editor that I can help them say the same thing in fewer words. In fact, they might even not notice what's missing. That's sort of like when an editor feels really magical about it. Oh, you can't even, when writers tell you that, I can't even tell what you got, John. That's a point of pride. So yeah, you do not need to like take it right up to the word limit like that. Even if you're going to have a teacher, parent, somebody else read it for you, come in at 625. Leave yourself a little room so it's a little easier to take suggestions. And like anybody who is, really going in and being more concise, there's always phrases. It's like it is not hard. You do not have to be a professional to take 650 words and make it 625.
But I guess is the question though, John, if, as the student is writing their first draft, should they even be worried about word count yet? Because I mean,
I
that's,
wouldn't be.
yeah,
I wouldn't
because
be.
you'd rather read, honestly, if we're working with a student, I'd rather see their ideas or what they want,
Get it out there.
get it out there, and then we might pick and choose. We might, remove one of the things that they want to talk about. So I wouldn't, kind of send something in that's 1,200 words, but if it's 700, 800 words, it's fine.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely. I would handle that. I mean, you sort of know as you're writing it, wow, I guess I'm getting a little long here, but still keep writing. You don't, you can then go ahead according to your plan, your outline, build it to completion. You're probably already thinking about some things to trim, but go ahead and finish it up. Now you have a point where you can sort of say, oh, I made this point 3 times. I can lose this. I already said it here. Then you start going through that process. I have had students for whom that's really hard. And I had a couple of students turn in the 650 word essay at over 1,000 and just said, can you help me with this? So yeah, we can do that. It's going to be more than trims, right? You're going to end up taking out whole sections, whole things. And even in those cases, I was often asking them more about it, exchanging one anecdote for a different anecdote that they told me because the one wasn't really illustrating it very well, and I'd ask them about. So even on those longer essays, we still end up with new material in them. Again, trying to put the best foot forward. Is this saying what you mean it to say?
So there's a good question about somebody's asking, how whimsical do you think an essay can get before it's strange?
I've had this question asked in different ways, and it doesn't have to be deadly serious if it can still show a seriousness of purpose. So nobody wants a pure court jester coming to their school. But if you are deft at whimsy and telling it like that way, it's going to be all the more effective when you toss in a couple of more serious things. It's hard to be funny. I've had students attempt poetry. I don't mean like haiku, but I've had people try to go overboard, I think, on the expression creativity side of that. And maybe that's okay if you want to study, like creative writing or something that you might be kind of expected to do that. So yeah, I would say not I wouldn't say no to no whimsy. Humor, like I mentioned, the one student's humor, toward this, he has seriousness of purpose, right? Even as he laughs at himself about crashing so many drones that he had to go to foam board. But that shows personality and zest, and like those are like pleasing qualities beyond the resourcefulness of it. So I would just say it works if it comes off showing good traits in the person and doesn't undermine the showing of those good traits. It could be funny.
So I have two more quick questions. Is it a good idea if a student has a spike to center the main essay around that spike? So is there something that they're really, interested in or they've done a lot with in high school? Or since the spike would be clearly visible in other areas of the application, should the student choose a different topic?
So if by spike we mean thesis or like an organizing principle of the
Yeah,
person's
it could
life
be that, or it could be
or an
like,
event.
or it could just be like, they are so interested in, robotics, that everything they do like focuses about robotics.
So we will get a lot of people asking us about, things that are in the common application, answering of other questions versus what's in the essay. So we will try to spread it around. But if there is a spike in something that's so strong and the student can write a great essay around it and already has good ideas around it, I wouldn't tell them, no, don't do that, find something different. If it's that good,
Mm-hmm.
and you can bring things out in the essay that you can't bring out in the more
Right.
laundry
I was just going to say,
explanations here.
as long as you're like adding more color, like that's important to whatever this spike is, that you're just not reiterating what is already included in other parts of the
Yeah, you
application.
don't exactly. One of my colleagues said, in fact, it was the previous session, I think, that you will see things like never write about this topic, 50 phrases you should never use in a college essay. Heck, we have some of them on our site. I'll just say it's more about your approach, your presentation of yourself. It's not the topic per se. That said, some topics can be really hard to pull off well. Examples that we commonly use are, it's really hard to write about another person and show your own qualities in 650 words.
And
So
that tends to be a lot with relatives,
yes,
grandparents.
I'm
Yeah.
so proud of my grandmother. She was a pioneer, and it comes across like a report on the grandmother, which could be great for a different kind of essay, but not for a personal statement, unless you can like describe yourself through her eyes. And I'm making this up, but similarities, inspirations you had, and how you responded. But it ultimately has to be you. You're not trying to get grandmom into college. You're trying to get yourself in. Another one a colleague brought up was your love life. So it's just going to be really hard, right? Writing about young love. My girlfriend is, those are
Or
going to be difficult.
breakups.
A breakup, because these are going to, more emphasize, the youth, the inexperience, and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say, in the right hands, it would have to be an exceptionally mature person. The second we adults try to tell them, oh, you can't possibly do that, a very smart student will figure out a way. What would be the way? They would have to be a pretty sophisticated thought process around it, right? And they're coming to some like really mature kind of insights or learnings or something they want to do with their life based off of this breakup. But it would have to come across as like surprising, counterintuitive. It'd be really hard to pull off. So this is just too long-winded a way of saying it's about the approach. It's not really about the topic, but yes, some topics are going to be harder than others. If you have a great topic, even if it's reflected over here, reflected in a different way in the essay, or sure, come at it from a completely different angle. If you've got other, like if there's so much good material, traits to show, things that have been done that illustrate other things about the student, sure, try another approach.
And
There's
one
not
last,
just one essay to be written.
here's another good question, John, about, wait, here is, oh, what's the balance between editing and changing?
Yeah, so this is more of the editor's role here. I try as much as possible, especially with student essays, to maintain their voice. So, like the changes you saw there, I didn't rewrite her voice, but I did take out some things that maybe could be viewed as overdone or a little, much of an exaggeration, might fall flat. But I didn't put like a whole new style in place. I didn't put my take on it. The approach of our coaches is to draw the student out. That's why we often start with questions. I don't immediately react and say, that'll never fly. Use this. We don't do it that way. You would not end up with a good result that way. The way to the way to do it is probing, asking questions. Tell me more about this example. how did this come about? How did it make you feel? How serious are you about this? Are you sure you want to study this? And this can be a back and forth in comments, because kids today love the text. Go figure. So we're going back and forth, within Google Docs, and a lot of this. A lot of it will come out in an introductory Zoom chat with them as they're talking about an idea. I just I play editor, I play reporter, pepper them with questions, get them engaged, and see what they say, and then start making suggestions based on it. What about that? That's pretty interesting. Things will stick out, once you get a practiced eye for this kind of things. People will just say things, and it's like, that's pretty good. You thought about that? And then you try to grab hold of it, right? This is like what teachers try to do. This is the fun part of it. You try to help guide, like you point them in another direction. You say, yeah, but what about this? Just you're trying to point, not redo.
So there's a good question. This is maybe a little less essay related, and I can help address it. The question is, how do you address learning differences that are discovered late in school? So the grades may not reflect the ability. The student can still write a great essay that reflects themselves and demonstrates their leadership and drive, but how do we get past the academic bar? And that's a good question, and it probably relates to a lot of students. That doesn't have to be learning differences. Maybe students who just don't start off strong in high school, but then improve. And let me just say, so there's a section on the Common App called additional information. And if I was working with a student, I would actually suggest that you share this type of information about the learning differences. It could have been, even the example I gave, a student who may not have learning differences, but maybe just didn't start off high school strong, or maybe there were personal family issues that got in the way, that it interfered with their academics. I would absolutely explain that in the additional information section. It's actually like a section that gets overlooked by a lot of students. You don't even have to have a problem to explain the additional information. You can just use that section to kind of a little bit to continue to expand on areas that you want to talk about for yourself. So, I would share in that area, this additional information section, about the students' learning differences, and maybe explain a little bit when they were discovered and how you think it impacted their academics. But what's really most important, even with a student with learning differences, is that colleges want to see an upward trend. So even if 9th grade, 10th grade maybe wasn't the strongest, if they see that there is improvements, that's what they're looking for, because they know, students mature. Not everyone is going to be their strongest when they start high school. But again, if they've got the upward trend, that's important. I would also add, again, in the situation that you're talking about, or other similar situations, if there's anything that a high school counselor can address and include in their letter of recommendation, or if any other people who are writing the letters of recommendation can address this issue, again, that they saw improvement, that that just is another space where it could corroborate what you're trying to show, or it could actually have a teacher might explain how impressed they were, that the student might have started off with issues at the beginning of the year, but then was able to improve their situation. So, and then that's like that's a third party outside observer kind of adding this comment. So use the additional information section and try and see if recommenders will include any of this information in their letters of recommendation. So yeah, so it's kind of similar. Somebody said, I was told not to reveal ADHD and the like unless this is your whole story. This is highlighting that the kid may not succeed and complete the 4 years. I mean, I kind of agree. I don't think, if your student can excel or handle the academics of the school, whether or not they have ADHD or not, you don't have to share that information. Again, you want to kind of put your student in as positive a light as possible during the application process, unless you think that the college knowing something about like ADHD is important because it puts their academics in a different context, but you don't have to share that information. So
I'll just mention quickly, Debbie, one of my essay writers, he was the one that I forwarded you a letter about. He was, I'm not sure exactly what his physical challenges were, but he wrote a whole essay about scuba diving with his family and how his family helped him and supported him. And his essay was very interesting because it mentioned all this. And it talked about like them helping him get to the surface and everything, but it was also positive how he put it out there, his joy at all this. And then we helped him with his essay and he just addressed it head on. His case might be a little different because anybody seeing him, when he goes into the school, I don't know if he uses I don't know what particularly the situation is, but he just went at it head on. And I can tell you, he got into Purdue planning to study engineering. And he was really happy and wrote to us and thanked us about it. I had another student whose parents were very concerned because I think they thought she was coming across very rebellious in her essay, almost like she was writing, like a manifesto or something. They asked me to Zoom with her and get on, and talk with her. Very nice young woman. I just asked her about what trait. I just went through the system. Soon enough, she came up with another essay idea and we wrote that. So sometimes the pointing really does work, and yeah, you want to put your best foot forward. You'll hear differing advice on this, to be honest. I just read a piece recently where the college person was talking about how thrilled they are to have essays that deal with problems head on because they're so different. Everybody's trying to do like PR, and when they get something that's just brutally honest, no, I think at some level, right, you want to know this person is going to be a good student.
Right.
Whatever their issues or challenges are, you do want to know that. So I think Debbie's advice about upward trend and all that, schools want diversity. They want students of all kinds. Some have that, written right into their mission and what they're all about. So it depends on so many factors. But generally, when we're coaching people, yes, we're trying to help them put their best foot forward. We're trying not to bring up unnecessarily negative things.
So let's just do two more things because it's running late. John, can you just show the slides? I'll talk really, really quickly about a timeline. And then whoever wants to stay after that and listen to us edit the sample or the draft that was sent in, feel free, but just want to kind of like try and finish this up. So ideally, look, I mean, we're trying to get people to start early, really. I would say a lot of it for your benefit, a little bit for our benefit, but let me just tell you for your and your students' benefit. As you can see, strong essays just don't get pumped out overnight. There needs to be thought, there needs to be back and forth. You need to do what I call marinate, like let the essay sit for a while, come back, read it. And all of this takes time. Can a student write an essay in a weekend? Sure. Is that going to be as strong of an essay that they've spent a month outlining, thinking about? Probably not. So, we are nudging you and your student to get them to start now or at least over the summer. The point is that, and you guys all are going to soon know this, there are going to be more essays than you really expect because although we spend a lot of time talking about the Common App essay, there are some schools, which we haven't really talked about, have supplemental essays that every student who applies
we handle those too. Yeah.
Right, have to write the supplementals. And then in addition, there are these honors and scholarship essays. So depending on the level of selectivity of the schools that your student, the number of schools your student is applying to. Okay, it can easily grow from what you think is one essay is the Common App essay to potentially 5 to 8 to 10 essays. So the earlier you start, then the more time you have to do all those other extra essays. That's one. The second thing is, just filling out the Common App. It's going to take time. You want to do, a good job with that. There are going to be deadlines are going to start to come. There are rolling admissions deadlines that start in early August. There's early decision deadlines in the beginning of October, middle of October, and beginning of November. And plus, there's just their general schoolwork that starts in September. So as much as can be done over the summer, it's going to benefit your student. It's going to benefit you in terms of the pressure and in your family and the dynamics. You'll probably, and I can almost guarantee there will be a better outcome of the essay, the application, and potentially, where your student gets accepted if the work is done over the summer. So that's really the most important part of this timeline here, is to get started. You don't have to get started today, but June is a great month to get started, and really aim to, by the middle of August, to have majority of essays completed. That would be an ideal situation. Okay, John, the next page. So, hopefully from tonight, you've gotten a sense of how your student can approach essays, why they're important, this idea of the academic bar and kind of getting past that, and then the essays become even more important. Whether or not you feel that you and your student can handle this on their own, that's great. There are tons of students and families that, that handle the process on their own. But if you want some additional help, as John showed you people's essays, we've been working with students for several years. And I think the biggest thing about how we work with students is we meet them wherever they are in the process. And again, John gave you some examples of students that come to us with no idea of what they want to write about. Okay, that's fine. We're going to start, working with them from the brainstorming perspective. There are students who come maybe with an idea, but they don't know how to get it on paper. So we have to, draw them out and help them figure out the outline. There are students who've written the draft. We actually had one student last year, John, remember she had 3 different drafts of an essays. And she kind of, gave them all to us. And she said, I don't know which one I should use. I don't know if I should use a part of essay 1, a part of essay 2. And, and we helped her. So wherever your student is at, we can jump in and help. So we try and be as flexible as possible with the way we work with students, and also kind of the packages that we offer, because we also don't know. Sometimes a really strong writer, they can get it done quickly, and they might only need, maybe 1 essay package. Sometimes a student, takes a little longer, or sometimes they want additional help with supplements. And so these packages can be used for both the Common App essay and supplements and honor essays. They can kind of just start, being used, whatever time is left, it will continue to be used for other essays. So my encouragement, or our encouragement to everybody here, is we're giving you a discount, because if you can commit to us, it also helps us with our planning purposes. To be quite honest, in end of July, August, beginning of September, we get swamped too with people, asking for help. And at some point, sometimes we just have to say, like, we can't. So the earlier that we can plan, for us, the better. And so we're kind of incentivizing you to both help yourself, to know that you have a resource to help your student, and to help us with our planning purposes. So anyhow, if you want to commit tonight, and there'll be an email that goes out, there's a special $150 discount off of one of these 2 packages. The first package is just working on the essay, again, whether it's the Common App essay, whether you want to use it for supplements or honors essays, that's this is all one-on-one support. And the second is a bundle that includes working on essays, plus looking and helping your student with the Common App itself. So it's going through all the written sections of the Common App. And the most important piece of that is going to be the activities list. So helping your student either decide what to put on the activity list, or even if they've decided how the order of the activities list, or how to, because that's very tight in terms of the number of characters you have for each activity, how to pull out what's most important about that activity and title it, and kind of, you know, make it sound as good as possible in the short amount of space that's available. So those are the two packages we have, and you'll get emails on that if you're interested in taking advantage. And that's officially what we have tonight. But if you want to stay, we are going to look at this one student's essay that was sent in, because we said that we would, you know, read an essay and give feedback on it. So here it is.
So this just came in hot off the presses. I think this came in, what, Debbie, about an hour before game time here. It's not even a completed essay, but one of our people here sent this one in. It's the first half of an essay. I took a quick look at it earlier, but why don't we read it together and be thinking about applying your skills now? And you're the editor in this case, and we're helping. I believe one of the parents sent it in, right, Debbie?
Yeah.
So now you're in the same boat as I am if we were receiving this. You're getting this. How do you coach the student? As I eagerly stepped out of the airport doors, an alarmingly cold gust of wind greeted me. Great, I thought. Feeling cold was the cherry on the top to being sweaty, hungry, tired, and nervous. You would imagine getting off of a 14-hour flight to Taipei, Taiwan's capital, would be a little more welcoming. On February 15th, I would truly begin to experience my school's Voyager Exchange program. It was selective, open only to the most fluent language students. Luckily, I had been learning Mandarin since the age of 4. Although it used to be one of my least favorite subjects, using Chinese outside of the classroom quickly superheated my interest. From singing with the Chinese National Orchestra at the Kennedy Center at age 9 to hosting my school's Chinese New Year celebration as a sophomore, my passion for using the language always manifested. My teachers recognized this, putting me in more advanced classes with older students. I felt encouraged by this fact, considering I was the only African-American student in my grade to be advanced. The few other students came from families who spoke the language at home. I have been to China twice, but both times were with family and tour guides. This time, I would stay in a Taiwanese homestay for 2 weeks. This time, I would turn 17, celebrating my first birthday away from home. After a 2-hour ride to Taichung, my host brother, Jerry, came to pick me up with his mother, Joanne. Although I had met them on social media weeks before, our interactions hadn't gone further than the standard small talk routine. I had packed my bags full of excitement and hope, but fear squeezed itself in as well. Will I fit in? Will they treat me differently? Luckily, once the awkward stage of meeting my host family ended, we quickly became close. Despite my years of studying Chinese, I was scared that it wouldn't be enough to connect with my host family. Much to my surprise, I found myself cracking and laughing at jokes, talking about history and culture, and exchanging life experiences with them. Now, it gets a little broken up in different parts here, so I'll just cut down a little bit. This marked the beginning of a strong camaraderie. He and I became inseparable, discussing anything from very personal matters to life's universal phenomena in both our native languages. Bits and pieces here. One of my favorite memories from the trip, even to this day, I clearly remember. So then snippets. So this is typical writing process, right? Starts off here and then, so this is sent in to us. What do you tell the student? How's this going? Thoughts?
I also added again the traits, if people want to kind of start to think about this. I added the traits in the chat. If people um, want to evaluate this essay, but any thoughts on like, where, again, this is just the beginning, where the student is going with the essay? You have recommendations on what more they should be focusing on.
I'll put it another way too. This is sort of how, our editing approach. What questions might you ask? What more do you want to know?
Am I allowed to unmute and talk?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that the beginning felt weak, as in I didn't, but every paragraph was a surprise after that. And I was kind of excited by the surprise and the buildup that I was getting reading those later paragraphs. But I think I would recommend that they redo the intro at the beginning. So you got a sense of who this person was a little bit, even if you're going to use the, build things up over time.
What traits do you think are being described here?
Empathy, and he's willing to be, I assume it's a he, willing to be vulnerable and to express, his uncertainty and joy at connection. So I liked the focus on connecting with people and how I still don't know how he became a non-native fluent speaker of a different ethnic background who had learned this language from age 4. I think that would be intriguing to find out more about that eventually.
I completely agree. I would love
Completely
to know
agree. That
more
yes.
about that. And I got to believe that that's going to show even more of these important traits that you would want a college to know about that student.
That could be the most interesting piece. Instead of the buildup of storytelling, it might be, just if we were Zooming with a student. Tell me about this. How did you start studying Mandarin at age 4? Yeah, I bet some more interesting things would come out. And then I would more ask, so this opening, what are you illustrating with? It's like we want a purpose, a meaning behind everything. Why is this trip get to occupy the top here? Is this like a pivotal moment that you're setting up? What are you getting at? What am I, the essay evaluator at a college, supposed to be making of all this? If I'm looking for, and yeah.
John, there's a good comment, and actually, we had this discussion a lot in a previous session, but somebody says, it doesn't feel like an essay, it feels like a travel log. And that's actually an important comment, because a lot of times students who are also like sharing about traveling, it turns out to be what they end up writing, a travel log, of kind of, and I went here, and then I did this, and then I did that. And they're never really, they're just like explaining what the trip was about or the travels was about, but they're never really kind of expressing any of the important traits and demonstrating, what they might have learned or taken away from that experience.
I strongly suspect he has traits other than empathy and what's already being shown here. If we were to ask him the questions, I bet they come out. This does not sound like your everyday student, does it?
Right.
So
right.
I would want to draw that out more and make that even more distinctive. If I were working with a student, there'd be a lot of questions around that. I would ask about other anecdotes, things that have happened, moments in time. We would just discuss a whole lot more to sort of say, okay, now how do we put this all together? What is our best intro? And doesn't take quite so long to bring out the other qualities.
And the other thing personally I would like to know is, this is, a lot of potentially interesting, traits and experiences from this student. But what do they want to do with this all when they get to college and beyond? So and again, they don't have to have, a definitive answer, but it's got to be that they want to use all this for something. And I think we have to have a little bit of a hint about what the future is.
It's leading to.
Yeah, where it's leading. So, Okay, everyone, long night. I hope this was helpful. You both, got a sense of how the essays are reviewed, how we work with students, an approach you might want to use with your student. And if nothing else, that you've got the sense to get started or kind of push your student to get started and do as much as you can over the summer. That's going to be my mantra. Do as much as, push them to do as much as they can over the summer. Okay, everyone. Talk to you soon. All right, any questions you have, feel free to send them to support@road2college.com. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.